Hello and welcome back to the penultimate Reddit League show of season 6, week 12 basically, even though we had like a break in there, so it's technically week 13. But we'll be talking about our results from the playoffs and basically, the last matches of this season, bar the final next week. And today I'm joined by Cameron, TheRealClyde. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Um, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. Good to hear. And yeah, we'll start immediately with the playoff results from Division 5. And we'll start this time from top to bottom so as to, not confuse our viewers. And we'll start with Clemu against Penguin. And you'll see in sort of the later the upper divisions as well, that a lot of the games were fairly close. This one ending up in a 3-0. I mean, none of the maps were extremely one-sided. Penguin within, 3K on all of them, but Clemu coming away with a 3-0 win here.
Yeah, so I think it's one of only three sweeps we saw among all of the promotion playoffs and relegation playoffs. So it's not something that happened too often. But as you said, like the scores were still fairly close. Kind of breaking it down. So the first map, Clemu beats out Penguin in a diverse AI world. Wasn't the easiest world or wasn't the easiest seed in the world in terms of pinpointing. There was, I remember, a tough round in Southwest Russia, but Klemu did well overall. Penguin had a little bit of trouble with the last round in particular, which was in the far north of Norway. So that's probably where most of that point differential ended up coming from. I guess it is worth mentioning that Clemu did outperform Penguin on basically all of the world maps during the regular season, so maybe not the biggest surprise that he was able to win there. Um, Moving on to map 2, which was in South America, both of them performed pretty well there, both getting, like, well over 23, 24K, but there was basically just one tough Uruguay round that Clemu got a little bit closer on. So, they both basically found the rest of the rounds, and that was kind of the main deciding factor there. I guess as you'll see a bit later on, there have been a few seeds where, like, both of the competitors were fairly equal on, like, the other 4 rounds, but there's just sort of one round that's, like, more difficult to pinpoint. One person just happens to get closer than the other, and that's kind of how they win that round. So, um, I guess that's just kind of how it goes on AI gen maps, but anyway. For map 3, that was South Africa. Um, yeah, not too much to talk about there. Um, I would just say that, yeah, even though Clemu swept, Penguin was, like, a lot, I would say, probably more competitive than the results would suggest. It's just that on a few of the seeds, sometimes you just have, like, 1 or 2, like, bad quote, unquote, "bad rounds" where you just would not be able to pinpoint the location, and I think Clemu was just a little bit more consistent on that front, so credit to him as well.
Yeah, exactly. You said it. Basically, mostly coming down to those 3 rounds. The Norway round you mentioned, that was about 2,500 points. Not quite enough to turn the whole match around there, but a lot of that score differential coming there. The Uruguay round you mentioned in the South America seed, where again, neither of them actually found the location, just Clemu being a bit closer. I'm wondering in that round if they both kind of went the wrong direction at the start, because that's what I did. Because the round is actually fairly close, maybe like 200 meters southwest is a major highway in Uruguay. So I'd be surprised if neither of them, managed to find much information on that. I
Mhm.
think I went like 2.5, 3 minutes the wrong direction, and then once I made it to the highway, actually, like I don't think there's anything particularly close on it. But I imagine if you'd went like 3, 4 minutes in some direction on that, you would have probably found something. But yeah, that was the main difference there. I think on like if you combine all of the other rounds, Penguin and Clemu were roughly even on that. I think Penguin would have lost by like 13, 14 points. But yeah, definitely the majority coming from that. And yeah, South Africa as well. Just what that one round, which was around in sort of the north central part of South Africa, which is very difficult to get generally if if you don't know what it looks like, because you'll probably not find much information bar a couple of like small town names. Um, you will see them relatively frequently if you are in that region, so it's probably good to learn and know a couple of them. But yeah, Klemu got within like 12 kilometers there, and Penguin dropped about 3,000 points. So in this case, actually, it would have turned that map around. But yeah, it is what it is. Unfortunate for Penguin. 3-0 loss there. So couldn't quite repeat what he'd done in the regular season, where he beat Klemu on 2 of those 3 maps. But still, yeah, as we said, a decent performance from him. Just slightly not quite good enough this season, but well, he's got another chance next season, and we'll see how he does there. Moving on to the relegation decider between Hordy and Corgi, which rhymes nicely. We had some pretty close games on 2 of the occasions, and then one blowout in particular in Lithuania.
Yeah. So Lithuania, that particular seed was potentially pretty punishing. Just that seed had a lot of coastal locations and locations like really close to the borders. So if you were unable to find a location, like hedging in the middle of Lithuania would not help much. And that's like typically a strategy that you would use in Lithuania if you can't find anything. Um, yeah, for Lithuania specifically, it looks like Hordy really struggled in kind of the middle rounds. He also struggled with Lithuania a bit in the regular season, so perhaps not the best map for him to choose on that occasion. Corgi was able to remain mostly mistake-free that seed, besides like a tough round 2, so and he really just found more of the locations, which is something you really had to do for that seed. For the second map in a diverse AI world, it ended up being a really tough seed for both of them, it looks like, but Hordy did just pull out the win. There was a tough round in New Zealand where Corgi guessed in Tasmania and Geordie guessed the wrong island of New Zealand, but still got much closer. There was another tough round in Peru where Corgi got closer, but Geordie did barely come out on top there. Um, in map 3, so that was the deciding round in South America. Obviously a really, really close match. Both of them had an easier time with that seed than the other 2, but Corgi did barely pull out the win by only around 50 points or so. Um, they both sort of struggled in different rounds in that seed, but I guess on the whole, Corgi just made mistakes that were slightly less costly. So, yep, Corgi ends up winning the series, stays in Division 5. Hordy, I believe, will return to Reddit League next, if that's how it works.
Yeah, potentially. He'll have the opportunity to go through the preseason again next season.
Right.
And always, depending on how well he does there, how many people sign up, we could see him again in Division 5 next season. But if he does not manage to directly qualify through that, then yes, he would go to next again, where he's come from last season. But I think he
Mhm.
was still the best out of the 2 people. I think it was him and Strassel who made it through Reddit League next in season 5. And Strassel unfortunately got directly relegated. So he at least made it to the playoff. And it was that close. Like literally, you had 49 points in South America separating the 2 of them, um, which could have easily gone the other way, especially if you look at the scores. If you're talking about like 25k to 24-9 something, you can say, okay, it maybe looked closer than it is, but with those scores, that could have so easily gone a different way. Someone just maybe making like a last second adjustment, going like 10 kilometers further north or south in a round where you're really like, I have no idea where it is anyway, could make the whole difference there. And yeah, you said it in that seat specifically. There were basically like 2 rounds. Yeah, that Peru round I think that you mentioned, and that round in Uruguay where I personally I didn't even know it was Uruguay. That's in 4 minutes 20.
Mhm.
I couldn't figure that out. So that just shows a fairly difficult seed for the 2 of them. And I really like that Lithuania seed. It was like the first Lithuania seed I ever 25K'd because it's usually god awful to pinpoint. And I still
Yeah,
think, yeah, as you said though, it was very difficult and probably actually for someone who's good at Lithuania, not too much trouble. I had Lunacy play through it as well, and he scored pretty good as well. But if you're not confident about it, as you said, with those border locations, that one location in the southwest of Lithuania, that kind of swamp like area where you really struggled to find any information that was, more than a small town name. Really, really difficult seed there as well. And yeah, then what was the last one? The world map, I think, yeah, just again some pretty tough locations for them. I mean, 16K to like 15K on a world map, you just know that that wasn't an easy seed. And
right.
interesting round, like they had a round in Latvia in that world seed where after 4 minutes and 20, Corgi went on the Czechia Slovakia border and Hori was like in northern Hungary. So yeah, things happened. But yeah, I still think overall, with how their season's gone, I think both of them had good seasons. And yeah, Corgi just slightly coming out on top here, kind of reflecting their direct duels in the regular season, where Corgi also won 2 out of those 3 maps. Coincidentally, actually, South America and Diverse AI World were swapped here. So in the regular season, Corgi won the world
Hmm.
map and Hordy South America. That went the other way around this time. But yeah, Lithuania just slightly more in favor of Corgi here. All right, then let's move over to Division 4, where we've got 4 maps, 4 matches actually, so that's 12 maps even. And yeah, we'll start off at the top with Solar Sensei against Lunacy, which is a matchup that will also be featuring a match cast. That will be featuring in a match cast somewhat later in the week, hopefully, because we do have videos from both of them. But yeah, it was a fairly close game again with a fantastic performance from Lunacy in the world map.
Yeah. So yeah, map two was yeah, diverse AI world. Both did quite well. Echo obviously had a very impressive performance there, just 1 point shy of a 25K. Solar Sensei did make a few small mistakes here and there, but I mean, he still played pretty well, but he would have needed basically a perfect performance to win that round. So well done to Echo there. So looking at the first map, that was Lithuania again. Yeah, Echo won that by a fairly decent margin. That's for that seed. Rounds 4 and 5 seemed fairly straightforward, but rounds 1 and 3 were a little bit less so. And Echo just got a little bit closer in terms of pinpointing, so there's don't have too much else to say there. During the regular season, they were both fairly evenly matched in that Lithuania week, but Echo managed to outperform Solar Sensei there. For the third map in South Africa, it was a slightly easier seed than some of the ones we've seen for South Africa. Some of them could be pretty rural and difficult to pinpoint. Echo did have a little bit of a lead headed into that last round, but it seems that I didn't play the last round, but it looks like Solar Sensei was just able to make a bit of a better landscape guess
Yeah.
to win that round and avoid the sweep. But ultimately, Lunacy will move up to Division 3. He was hanging around Division 4 the last couple of seasons, I think, so I think he's probably glad to be able to move up. Solo Sensei, I think, has been around Division 4 a while too, but he's been pretty consistently competitive and at least getting somewhat close to being promoted. So hopefully, um, next season will be his season to move up.
Yeah, they've both been in Division 4 since Season 4. And yeah, both kind of always on that upper edge, just, close to that promotion or those promotion spots. And this time Lunacy, finally managed to pull it off. He's been in the playoffs before. In his debut season, he finished second in the division and then lost the promotion playoff against Steal the Snick. And in season 5, let me just quickly check that, he finished 5th on his side of the table. And Solar Sensei as well has been in the playoffs last season and unfortunately lost to Carp in the semi-final of those. So they've both had experience with these before. And yeah, for Lunacy, it ended well this time. You mentioned that round 5 in the South Africa seeds. I don't think either of them found much information there, just solo with a better landscape guess. I think you could have found information, but neither did I. So I think there were just a lot of different ways to go, and maybe the information wasn't in the direction that seemed the most obvious. So yeah, the other 4 rounds, as you mentioned, were fairly straightforward. So yeah, Lunacy with a great guess in round 4 of the world seed as well, which was, I don't even think there was much information in that round. There was apparently like a pickup truck or something that mentioned Yukon, but I think that was the only information to work with, and he got within like 200 meters of a random highway in Yukon, which was pretty impressive. And yeah,
Wow.
Lithuania not particularly great for either of them. I mean, Lunacy had just 1 round where he apparently couldn't really find much and dropped like 3k there, but Solar, sorry, struggling with most of the first 3 rounds of that seed. And yeah, all in all, I think definitely a deserved promotion for Lunacy, and it'll be interesting to see how he does next season, because we've kind of been having over the last 1 or 2 seasons a bit of a bottleneck in Division 4, where it was difficult for the good players to get out of it, to sort of get promoted, because there were so few promotion spots available. And here and there, a few red cards in Division 3 meant that relatively few people got relegated, which meant that now with more promotion spots, it's very interesting to me to see where those newly promoted people will end up in Division 3, because I could totally see them fighting for promotion spots again straight away. But yeah, maybe I'm underestimating the people of Division 3 here as well, and maybe they'll be struggling too. But yeah, that'll be something interesting to look forward to as we moved on to the next matchup, which was Mikpiet against Wakelock. Wakelock, kind of the surprise of the season with his spectacular run to the playoffs, almost made it even further, was not too far away from that automatic promotion spot. But yeah, unfortunately, not quite enough in the end. The playoffs were actually still fairly close, at least on 2 maps. So he definitely had, a valiant effort there too. But still, unfortunately, at the end, got swept 3-0.
Yeah, so second sweep we've seen so far. So for the first map in Finland, McPiat won that one. It seems that the first 4 rounds were pretty straightforward, and the 5th round was just really tough for both of them, with neither of them getting all that close, like, at all. McPiat did have, like, a small, like, 50-point-ish lead going into that last round, but he did end up being a little bit closer anyway, so he won that seed. Map 2, was in Argentina. It was definitely an interesting one that I took note of, because 3 of the locations were in the far south, and 2 of those locations are only, like, a few kilometers away from each other, one of them being in the city of Rio Gallegos, and the other one being on Highway 3, I believe, just, like, a little bit to the west of that. It was interesting that the highway round was a lot easier for them than the actual city round, because both of them 5K'd the highway, and I'm sure maybe there was some sign somewhere that helped with that, but neither of them got particularly close to the city. They were just unable to recognize that. Um, so yeah, that was a bit curious, I guess, but it turns out that the Rio Gallegos round, which was the last round, that pretty much ended up being the difference. They were basically neck and neck through the first 4 rounds, and McPiat just got closer than Wakelock on that last round. So yeah, and then the last round in South America, McPiat doing really well there. Considering he also did really well in South America during the regular season, that wasn't a huge surprise, I suppose. Um, Wakelock, I guess, continued to struggle with the far south of Argentina, specifically, just kind of missed that round, while McPiet got fairly close, and I guess that's where most of the points were lost for Wakelock. So, I guess both of them did quite well in the two Brazil rounds, so that's something. But yeah, overall, through the series, I think McPiet was the better player overall. Um, so he'll move to Division 3. I think he narrowly missed out on the promotion playoff last year, so I'm
Mhm.
sure he's happy about that. And Wakelock, I believe he's been in Division 4 for quite some time now. I think since season 3-ish, season 3 or 4, something like that. So he'll stay in Division 4 for another season, and we'll see if he can make that jump to Division 3 next season.
Yeah, he had. Yeah, you were right. He's been in Division 4 since season 3. After he got relegated from Division 3 in season 2, which he'd previously gotten promoted to in season 1. So he has experience in Division 3, but unfortunately won't be returning just yet. Yeah, funny that you mentioned those two like Rio Gallegos rounds in the AI Gen Argentina seed, because I had the exact opposite experience. I didn't find the highway location and had no problems with the city locations at all. So yeah, interesting to see that both of them really struggling with the city location there, as I'd imagine that wouldn't have been that much of a difficult round. Um, but yeah, pretty much decided there. And yeah, as you said, his Wakelock's woes with Argentina continued, and he also had real trouble in the two Chile rounds that seed provided. Didn't get particularly close to either of them, which just, yeah, overall were too many mistakes to kind of challenge Mick Piet on that. So yeah, let's move on to the relegation deciders, and we'll start with Jean Hérisson against Erikmi, which we'll hopefully also be able to get a cast done for. And yeah, maybe a slight surprise here with Jean Hérisson, who looked to be struggling a bit on occasion during the regular season. But he managed to pull through, managed to, edge out Eric Mead there on two of the maps. None of them incredibly close, I think. I would have to have a look at that last map where, yeah, hitting me, struggling in two of the rounds. So even that, none of it really just down to, those fine margins. Most of them just, a couple of rounds that made the difference there.
Yeah, I would say that for the most part, there wasn't like too much, I guess, randomness thrown into the mix here, as you may see with a couple of other like the AI Gen seeds. So, yeah, map one, Hadikmi, solid win in Finland. Maybe not a huge surprise given he also did well in Finland in week one, while Jean Harrison did struggle a little bit that week. But yeah, I think Harrison was just unable to find one of the more coastal locations in round two, which ended up costing him. Um, if he did manage to find that round, he probably would have won, actually. I think he had Hedekny beat in the other four rounds, so perhaps he was just a little bit unlucky there. For map two, Arizona did end up winning on a diverse AI world. Just a couple of mistakes by Edikme, guessing Eswatini in a Lesotho round, which I'm sure we've all done at some point. Um, Arizona was also a little bit closer in the US round. I believe was somewhere in like northern Alabama. He was able to find that it was Alabama, while Edikme, I think, guessed somewhere in Illinois or something like that, so a little bit further off. The other rounds besides those were fairly straightforward, so I think it was just those two that ended up being the main difference. Um, let's see. Lastly, for yeah, that's South America seed in map three that you were mentioning. Um, yeah, Arizona wins that round with a very solid performance. He basically found every location and just lost a handful of points on pinpointing or points on pinpointing. Adikmi had a little bit of trouble with the Brazil and Chile rounds, but I mean, he was able to get close, but unfortunately, it wasn't quite enough. So yeah, Arizona ends up winning the series and avoids regulation. Erikmi will join Division 5. Erison, I believe, was new this season
Mhm.
to Reddit League, while Erikmi had been around Division 4 for quite a while. Um, Another Division 4 veteran, I suppose. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think with people like, yeah, Erison, and there'll be a few others I'll mention, Clemu earlier. There's been a lot of kind of new blood in Reddit League that have been making an impact in these playoffs.
Yeah, and a pretty good impact in this case. Also, I just kind of noticed and would like to mention how there's only really been that one round in those three maps that Hedikmi kind of significantly won against Generison, that one Finland round. Um, Apart from that, there were a couple where they were pretty even, but there were 7 rounds that Generison won over Hedikmi in like with like a significant points difference of like at least 100 points or so, whereas Hedikmi won 2 more, both by like 1 point. But that just shows like overall Generison just played better over the course of those 3 maps. So again, I think a deserved winner here. And yeah, he'll manage to stay in Division 4. Edikmi has been here in Division 4 since Season 3 and will unfortunately have to take that way down into Division 5. But yeah, I'll give him a little bit more time in the rounds. Maybe he's gonna feel a bit more confident to fight for those promotion spots. He was actually in that fight, I think, in his debut season, but ever since then he's kind of dropped down the table a bit and has mostly been fighting against relegation. So maybe he can turn his fortunes around a bit next season with that. Moving
Mhm.
on to the next one, we've got Dromi against Heyemine. Dromi, I think a newcomer as well. Let me just quickly check because I'm not. No, he's been here last season too. I think last season was his first one. And back then he also finished in the relegation playoffs and back then managed to win that first round against Trebliha. And yeah, second season, still in the relegation playoffs, but still successful, apparently, against Teimine, who, a bit unfortunate for him, I think he's gotten promoted at some point. I think he was already in Division 4 last season, where he finished fourth in Division 4B, so a little bit of a drop down there. Yeah, he got promoted in Season 4 back then with a pretty good second place and then a win in the promotion playoffs against Xander, interestingly. So very unfortunate for him to go back down into Division 5. But yeah, again, kind of that's a similar scenario as we've had with who did we have that with? Yeah, Hodi and Corgi, I guess, where 2 of the maps were fairly close, with Hegemini winning map 1 in Finland, and then Dromi winning map 3 in South America by relatively fine margins, and then a complete blowout in Argentina for map 2.
Mhm. Yeah, I think for the Argentina one in particular, yeah, Dromi beat Hiermine by a landslide essentially, and that was a little bit of a surprise considering Hiermine. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right, but anyway, um, he did perform much better than Dromi in Argentina in the regular season, but Dromi did come back with a strong performance to win that particular round. In Finland, it was another one of those seeds where Hiermine did end up winning, and it just came down to round 3, just a pretty tough rural round where no one could really find it, but Hiermine just ended up hedging a little bit further south and getting a little bit closer to Dromi. So it was a bit unfortunate for Dromi, who had actually 5K'd every other round that seed, but ultimately Hiermine did take that and avoid the sweep. Um, for map 3, South America, which ended up being the deciding round, it ended up being a fairly easy seed, all things considered, at least compared to a couple of the other South America seeds we've seen. Looks like there were plenty of clues to at least get somewhat close in every round. Romy just ended up winning that one with a performance that was pretty close to perfect, bar a few pinpointing errors here and there. Yermine did well too, but just, yeah, dropped a couple 100 points here and there, and ultimately could not make up that difference. So yeah, Dromi wins the series, and I believe he'll stay in Division 4 for the third straight season now, while Hiromane has been bouncing a little bit between Divisions 4 and 5, and we'll hope to climb back up to Division 4 next season.
Mhm. And yeah, you mentioned that one round in Finland in particular. That was one of the few rounds. I think there were two Finland seeds that had one round each where there wasn't much to work with. And yeah, that one of them, and as you mentioned, Heimne getting quite significantly closer there. And Dromi will have been happy that round 5 in the South America seed, where he dropped 14 of his 15 points dropped, wasn't much of a decisive round, because that was pretty much a round on a, probably looking at this, about 8 to 9 kilometer long straight road with not really much of a point of reference. Um,
Ah,
so yeah, he didn't use all of his time. He used like 3 minutes, and he was like, maybe here, and he was like 2.5 kilometers off. Um, but yeah, there was really nothing there that you could use to help yourself. So yeah, he's had that he had that match decided beforehand, thankfully for him. All right, then let us move on to Division 3 here. And we'll start again with the promotion decider between Steal the Snick and Paulinho. Steal the Snick, who last season himself got swept 3-0 by Budbat, has come to take revenge. Not against him, but against Paulinho, his new opponent. And in a very dominant fashion. Map 2 was slightly close, but every other map wasn't even anywhere near to being close. A perfect score by him. Very good performance there in Finland. And yeah, almost 7K difference in South Africa as well. Just an incredibly solid performance from him.
yeah, for sure. I would say overall Nick was definitely the better player in that series, so he certainly deserves to move up to Division 2. As you mentioned, he did get swept in the promotion playoffs last year, so it certainly feels good for him to move up after that. Paulino will, I believe, stay in Division 3 for the third or fourth season in a row. I believe he's been down there for a while. But the last two seasons especially, he's been fairly competitive in the fight for promotion, so we'll see if he can get a good result next season. Um, Going to, let's see, map 1. Yeah, I mean, Steal this Nick, obviously dominant performance in Finland, 25K'd. It was pretty impressive considering it didn't seem like the easiest seed. I just skimmed through it, so I'm not entirely sure. But any case, yeah, well done on his part. Polino wasn't quite able to match that. In the diverse AI world map, map 2, that round was a little bit closer. But unfortunately, Paulino was just completely lost on a rural Spain round, just ended up going in Mexico and got basically no points to show for that. He did do fairly well on the rest of the rounds, and Nick did make a few mistakes here and there, but unfortunately, that kind of first Spain round was just too much for Paulino to overcome. For South Africa, another tougher seed and a lot of locations that are near like the borders. So, fortunately, if you're lost, hedging middle again didn't really do you too many favors. It looks like round 1 in particular was like almost impossible for everyone. Like, it didn't really seem like anyone got close. But Nick ended up doing relatively well in the rest of the seed, and Paulino did struggle on a couple of the other rounds. So probably not how Paulino wanted to end the season, but regardless, he had a solid season overall, and I'm sure he'll be ready to come back next season.
Yeah, I think overall this matchup might have had the most difficult seeds out of any of the matchups. I don't know how Steel the Snake managed to 25k Finland. I mean, I play all these seeds seriously, of course, when I create them. Well, semi seriously. I don't practice for them at all, but I play them as if they were, a normal seed that I have to play. And I didn't find anything really, as far as I remember, in two of the rounds. Obviously, could have gone the wrong way, etc. But yeah, so that was actually when I talked about rounds in Finland that were maybe a little bit not random, but maybe had less information potentially. I'm sure I was thinking of one of those rounds in this seed as well, and he's still had no problems with it. So yeah, that was very impressive. And then South Africa seed as well. Very, very tricky. You mentioned that round one where both of them scored 131 and 93 points respectively. And other than that as well, quite a few rounds. Not a single 5K in that whole map from either of them. That just shows how difficult that one was in particular. And yeah, you mentioned it. Any kind of a world map seed where you go on the wrong continent after having spent almost 4 minutes walking around is not an easy location. There was information on some of the signs that did point to, I think, at least the. Well, it did point to something. I think it mentioned something Spanish, or it just looked like Spanish signs or whatever. Um, but yeah, I'm not surprised. Well, maybe a little bit surprised about Mexico, but I'm not surprised he was struggling with that location in particular. And yeah, still this Nick in a round in Oklahoma where he apparently couldn't find much and guessed in Arizona there as well. So yeah, overall, definitely a great performance from Steel the Snake. Very well deserved promotion, and I'll be interested to see what he can do in Division Two because for the past 2 seasons, he spent most of it saying he doesn't feel like he's good enough for fighting for promotion in Division Three. And kind of doesn't know himself how he's ended up in those promotion playoffs twice. And well, I mean, he's going up another division now, so we'll see how he does there. And yeah, Paulinho kind of staying in Division 3. You mentioned it, he's been here since Season 4. I think his best performance to date. So we'll have to see if he can build upon that and kind of do the same that Steel the Snake did this season to kind of, come back from a playoff defeat and, accomplish the task in the next season.
For sure.
The relegation decider for Division 3 was a French derby between Tante and Antoine Pilote, which overall, again, was a fairly close matchup, in particular in a pretty horrible Argentina performance from both of them, where they both ended up around the 11.5K mark, with neither of them getting anywhere close on any of the locations. Genuinely, there was no score above 4K in any of the rounds from either of them. Because usually you see those scores, you'll have like, okay, you got like one round, you got a 5K or like 4 something in one round, and then the others were all terrible. But no, none of them got close on anything. But yeah, Tante coming out just ahead on that by about the 200 points. And then the other two maps, the third map in particular, which was South Africa, fairly close, just, Antoine Pilote, at least not getting swept there, edging out that one. But Tante with a somewhat convincing win in map 2 in Lithuania by about 3,000 points.
Yeah, for sure. So starting with the Argentina map, yeah, obviously the seed was pretty brutal for both of them. Um, yeah, the location spread was a little bit interesting as well because 4 of the locations were more towards like the northeast of the country, northeast or northwest. I don't quite remember. It might have been northwest,
It
but
was
anyway. And there
northeast,
was
yeah.
one in the northeast. Okay. And there was also one in the far south. So again, hedging middle did not help a lot here. And obviously, if you were to hedge at all, you typically wouldn't think of the northeast of the country as necessarily the first place you'd think of. So I guess knowledge of landscapes was probably the key to being successful in this particular round. But even that can only get you so far in Argentina with like no additional clues. During the season, Tante did do much better than Antoine in Argentina, scoring around 21,000 to Antoine's 16,000. So maybe he could have had that little bit of extra knowledge that pushed him over the top, but in such a close game, it's hard to say for sure. For map 2, Lithuania, it was, yeah, a pretty feast or famine seed, as many Lithuania rounds tend to be. There was one round in Vilnius, which I'm sure was a bit of a relief, but the rest were quite rural. So yeah, Tante just won that one by, I guess, minimizing his mistakes. Only really had a misstep in round 5, but Antoine also had missteps in both rounds 3 and 5 that ended up being a little bit more costly. So yeah. For map 3, South Africa, a bit of an I guess a little bit of an easier seed compared to some of the other ones we've seen. Antoine ends up winning that one. It was fairly close, but ultimately he, yeah, just made slightly less costly mistakes. So, yeah, Tante wins the series. Antoine moves down to Division 4. I believe they were both new to Reddit League this
Yes.
season, so both of them kind of trying to prove that they belong, and Tante just ends up edging him out.
Yeah, interestingly, in that South Africa seed, the deciding round, pretty much the same deciding round as we had it, I think, with Penguin and Clamu in a very similar area in that north central part of South Africa, just like maybe about 15 kilometers further southeast. And pretty much the exact same spread there, with Antoine getting about 10 kilometers to the east of the actual location and Tante being about 2,500 points off there. Actually, I'm now very curious. Was because I feel like I remember Clamu being 12 kilometers off as well. I just got to quickly check that. Yep, Clamu was 12
That sounds
kilometers
about
off in
right,
that
yeah.
round two. Yep, exact same distance. Just Penguin, unfortunately, a little bit further away than Tante was. But yeah, that Argentina seed was pretty horrible for both of them. And Antoine Pilot, actually, interestingly, in round two, he guessed pretty much where round three was, and in round three, he guessed pretty much where round two was. So just another bit of bad luck there. Maybe just sometimes you mix up certain regions in your head. Sometimes it's not even about mixing up. You just think one area looks like another, and you just get it wrong. And yeah, that costly there for him. And yeah, the Lithuania seed, as you said, not the most difficult one. There was when I played the seed, I had trouble with one of the rounds, and yeah, Tante and Antoine very much struggling with round five. Neither of them found anything there, but as you said, round three, the difference here with Tante getting a lot closer there and winning the series and managing to stay in Division 3 as a consequence, was also, slightly on top of Antoine in the regular season. I mean, both scored 13 points, but Tante with a slightly better score difference there. So it was always going to be a fairly close matchup. But yeah, in favor of him this time, as we will move on to Division 2. And of course, as we kind of mentioned last time, only one matchup here to really talk about with, two people getting red carded. Kind of with only 2 relegation spots, that means there's not much to decide in that area. So that leaves us with Ordbocker against Verdok, which ended up being another pretty close matchup. Kind of, we've seen that now a couple of times where these matchups have like 2 maps that are fairly close going either way, and then you just have one map that's pretty clear. In this case, map 1 being Lithuania. Again, kind of Lithuania, sort of the map that seems to prove the most difficult for the players apart from Argentina and I guess South Africa also sometimes. And then, yeah, that going pretty heavily in Verdok's favor, and then 2 pretty close maps on a diverse AI world in South America.
Yeah. So for that first map in Lithuania, both Wordok and Ordboka did pretty well on their Lithuania seed in the regular season, so it's not a huge surprise that they chose it, but obviously Wordok had a bit of an easier time with that seed. He basically got all of the rounds except for round 4, and Ordboka missed rounds 1 and 4, so it looks like Wordok was actually the only one who even really got close in round 1, let alone 5K'd it, so I
Mm.
guess that was pretty impressive. He did get a bit closer in round 4 too, so I guess it wouldn't have mattered too much, but yeah, he ends up winning that one. Moving on to map 2, that was an AI Gen world. Ordboka actually beats Wordok here just like he did in the regular season when they actually played each other. He essentially won from, yeah, 1 round in rural Ukraine, basically, where Odboka just got a little bit closer, I guess hedged a little bit closer to the middle, so a bit unlucky for Verdok there and lucky for Odboka, I guess. Um, let's see. Yeah, for map 3, that was in South America. Wordok wins some relatively tough rural rounds in there, but Wordok was able to pinpoint a rural Peru round a bit better than Nordboka. Also got a little bit closer on a tough Bolivia round too, so that seems like that ended up being the difference there. Overall, besides Lithuania and I guess maybe like one bad Ordboka around there, it was overall a pretty close match between the two. So yeah, Bordock will go back to Division One, where he was last season, or Boca will stay in Division Two for what I believe will be the third season in a row.
The third season in a row in Division Two, his fourth season, I believe, in Reddit League. Let me check season three. Possibly. No, he was actually in season three as well, so it'll be his fifth Reddit League season if he continues on. Now I got to check season two as well. No, he wasn't here there. Okay, good. Yeah, the probably the most interesting bit here was that Ukraine round in the a diverse AI world seed where Verdok, as far as I remember, kind of just mixed up two city names in his head and therefore didn't really hedge because obviously it's not a hedge. If you look at where he placed his pin, it would be a terrible hedge.
Ah, right.
But yeah, because of that, Ortboka just kind of hedging in the middle of the country just ended up closer to the location. And yeah, another interesting thing that I noticed was that even though, again, kind of neither of them got any 5Ks in the South America map, and even though they were only like 1,000 points apart, Verdok actually got the highest score than Ortboka in all 5 rounds. By just a little bit each time,
Mm.
but yeah, beat him out in all of them. Actually, I'm not right there. I missed the numbers in round five, so only 4 of them. Unfortunate there, but yeah, obviously not really a big deal winning anyway. And I think I gotta check now again. I think Verdok's been here since season one. Yes, he has been here since season one, so he's one of not many remaining like veterans, I guess. I think that's a good time again to count. Let's see how many are still left up. Um, Let me go through them by division. I think from Division One back in season one, we've only got Verdok left. Everyone else is gone. From Division Two back then, we have Freckles left. From Division 3, we've still got Seppo, we still got myself, and from Division 4, we've still got Wakelock, and that's it. So I guess we're down to 5 veterans who have been here since season 1, which is pretty interesting. The numbers are going down, maybe some people coming back, who knows. But yeah, hopefully those 5 will stay strong and will continue. But yeah, he's been, as you mentioned, very up and down. There's not been many seasons where he hasn't been fighting for either promotion or relegation. But yeah, he's
Mhm.
back in season one, in Division One next season. So it'll be interesting to see if this time around he can actually manage to stay up again. And I guess that brings us to Division One. And first up, my relegation decider against Nimrif, which there is also going to be a match cast of. That one we've actually already recorded. With myself and Nimrif kind of as special guests, giving sort of commentary as well, which we did for like the first time, which was quite fun. And yeah, it
Cool.
was a pretty interesting game. 2 blowouts, pretty much. Again, I'm winning Bhutan by about 4,000 points, and Nimrif completely destroying me in South Africa. And then a pretty close Argentina game.
Yeah. So starting with that first map, well, first, I guess the most noteworthy thing is that the map was Bhutan, and that was the only
Yeah.
that was the only time where I guess someone just did not ban Bhutan. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, you won that one pretty soundly. It seems like you were confident in your ability there, just because no one else banned it, I guess.
Mm.
Nimrif did actually do a little bit better than you in Bhutan when you guys played it in week 2, but ultimately, this time you did come out on top. Yeah, as you said, a close one in Argentina for map 2. The whole seed was pretty rural besides maybe, I guess, round 3. Both you and Nimrif made pretty significant mistakes. You on round 1, Nimrif on round 2, and the other rounds were relatively even, so it was just kind of that point differential on rounds 1 and 2. that ended up being the difference. You just made a slightly less costly mistake there. So you did end up winning that one. For yeah, South Africa, another roll heavy seed, as we've definitely seen before. Both of you struggled with it a lot in week 9, only getting around like what 12,000 points there.
Yeah.
So obviously, like with the with some of the seeds, it can be a really challenging map, and it looks like in this case it was pretty challenging again. Um, yeah, Nimrif got a little bit closer than you. Well, decently closer than you in rounds 1 and 4. And yeah, you just couldn't really find them, which is kind of how it goes. So Nimrif did end up winning that round and avoiding the sweep. But yeah, you avoid elimination for the second season in a, or not elimination, relegation for the second season in a row. And yeah, Nemrith, who I believe joined Division 1 last season, will
Yes.
now go down to Division 2.
Yep. And yeah, I kind of went as you kind of described it. I had a pretty okay seed in Bhutan. Like I found all of the locations more or less. Just kind of still despite that a pretty frustrating seed where I was kind of deciding between the exact right place and the place where I ended up guessing in 4 of the 5 rounds, where I was like, it could be here or it's here, and just kind of, deciding on the wrong thing every time, which was a bit annoying, but in the end, thankfully, of no importance, as Nimrith struggled quite a bit more in rounds 3 to 5, where he dropped significantly more points. Not too far away on any of them. I mean, it looks like he's dropped 4K points. You think he'd be pretty far away on some of the rounds, but he wasn't further away than 25 kilometers on any of them. It's just, Bhutan being a relatively small country and the mistakes adding up there.
Right.
And yeah, the Argentina seed. I mean, yeah, if you want to know what happened in round 1, watch the cast of it. I went into detail
Mhm.
there. That was quite something. But the rest of the seed went pretty well, and yeah, kind of more so to what I'd expect of myself in Argentina. Nimrif just struggling with that round 2, as you mentioned, and then round 3 kind of being not round 3, round 5 kind of being the decider at the end, I suppose, where neither of us really found any information at all, and I mean, guessed slightly closer just by 100 points, so that alone not the decider. But, if either of us had made a worse landscape guess, or I guess a better landscape guess, that could have just turned it all around on its head yet again. And yeah, then the South Africa map was just, again, kind of similar to the regular season, not going in my way at all. I think I didn't find any information in 2 of the rounds, and then just kind of overlooked a city name in round 4, because I just didn't expect the round to be this close to, Pretoria, Johannesburg, so I didn't look so close to there and couldn't find a fairly, easily findable town name if you were to scan there. But funnily enough, in round 2, which was relatively cut off coverage, you could travel for more than 3 minutes, so fine as a round, but there wasn't really much information at all there. Nimrith and I guessed pretty much the exact same wrong spot, about maybe 20 meters apart, 27 kilometers away from the actual location, which was very funny to see as well. But yeah, at the end, I'm coming out on top overall, which I'm very happy about. Knew it was going to be a difficult match. Didn't feel great because the order, I actually played them like the flipped order. I played South Africa first, so that, didn't do great for morale to begin with that.
Mhm.
But yeah, everything went well at the end. I kind of went into Bhutan with the kind of, mindset of, I'm not winning this anyway. Let's just go. And that apparently proved to be quite helpful in there. Yeah, we'll have to see. I think Nimrith mentioned to me that he probably won't have the time to compete next season because he'll be away over the summer. So he's probably planning to return to Division 2 in Season 8. But we'll wait for the schedule. That's not 100% decided yet. Maybe it turns out he'll have time around then. We'll see. But yeah, I get to survive in Division 1 another season, because I can't leave my boy Baseman alone. We've been in the same division since season 2, and yeah, we can't be changing that now. So yeah, on to a 6th season together. And yeah, speaking of Baseman, let's take a look at the Division 1
Yeah,
semifinals, where he's unfortunately lost against Barry. Kind of a little bit, the only score that sticks out a bit there, I guess. Because, well, one round in particular there in that AI generated world seed.
yeah. So going into that seed, it was pretty tough, all things considered. Like there were rural Colombia and Brazil rounds that weren't easily pinpointable. I mean, I'm sure you could get the general region, but pinpointing was certainly a struggle there. And as well as a US round in particular in the mountains of Colorado, that was quite difficult. So yeah, Barry ended up winning out against Spaceman, and it's really that Colorado round that made the difference. Barry being one of the only ones to virtually 5K it, which was very impressive, especially given the time constraint. And Baseman guessing more towards like the Pacific Northwest, California, Oregon sort of border, which honestly is pretty understandable without any big clues saying otherwise. Like I would very much easily confuse the two as well as someone who lives in California.
Mm.
So, um, yeah, Baseman did actually have Barry beat if you counted the other 4 rounds, but yeah, that Colorado round is ended up being what made the difference, and that's why you see the score differential you see.
Yeah, very unfortunate there for Baseman. Kind of similar to my guess, I was a bit more in California in the forests there, Baseman a little bit further north than me. I'm still very excited to see what these people actually found in that Colorado round because, I mean, with Barry, you kind of, he's American, you'd be thinking, okay, maybe he just, recognized the national forest as it being, somewhere in central Colorado. But Bastel and Pluki, as we'll see in a bit, were also fairly close on it. Not quite as close to the pinpoint as Barry, of course, but still, like within the right forest pretty much or close by. So I'm wondering if there was maybe something Colorado specific that they may have found. But yeah, as you mentioned, that was pretty much the decider. I think overall it was a pretty good seed for a Division 1 semifinal. As you mentioned, all of the rounds except for round 5 in New Zealand, which was very straightforward and not very tough at all. All the others were
Mhm.
fairly difficult to get right, and yeah, kind of made the difference, as we'll see in the other match as well, where Bastel comes out on top of Pluki by about 400 points there, where the main difference was being made in the round 3, the round in Brazil that you mentioned, which was in the state of Ceará. Kind of close to the ocean there, actually, not too far away from Fortaleza, where Bastel kind of just plonked in the middle of the state, actually like a little bit south of the middle of the state even, and Pluki just in the far south of it. I don't know if he's found anything specifically pointing him there or if he just kind of took a risk with it. But either way, didn't pay off. That alone, I think, wasn't quite enough to make the difference. I think he's lost another 100 points in the Colorado round, but just a more central guess there in Sarah. If Pluki had guessed pretty much where the writing for this state is, I think that would have turned it around. So yeah, another very, very close matchup there as well, to kind of decide our 2 finalists.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, as you mentioned, Bastel did just get a little bit closer into Brazil and the Colorado rounds, despite neither of them pinpointing. I am interested in kind of going back and looking at that Colorado round now. I think there are a few things in Colorado specifically that you can find that would indicate that's Colorado, whether it be like maybe a highway sign or something, or maybe like the license plate on the back of a car or something. Like their license plates are like relatively unique compared to like ones in a lot of the other states. So maybe they had some knowledge about that. Very obviously able to find the right road, so maybe he found a sign or something, recognized the forest. I couldn't tell you, but I'll be interested in looking at that again for sure.
Yeah, it was in Pike National Forest, which someone from the US might
Okay,
know. I've never heard of it, but it's also not actually
I've
written
heard of
on the
it, but
map. There is no mention of it on the map, I think. There is mentions of Pikes Peak next to Colorado Springs, which the national park or national
uh,
forest might be named after.
that could probably be it. Yeah, Pikes Peak is a fairly like well-known mountain in Colorado,
Hmm.
so maybe maybe Barry found something to do with that and just kind of do where it was.
Yep, definitely possible. But yeah, as you said, kind of that's being a very deciding factor in the seed alongside that Brazil round. So looking at our final now, we've got Barry against Bastel. For both of them, of course, with Bastel being his first season and Barry kind of his first season in Division 1. He is pretty much a veteran. He's been in Reddit League since season 3, where he started out in Division 4. And ever since then, he's pretty much won everything there was to win. I think he won in his first season in Division 4. Then he came second in Division 3, and then he came fourth in Division Two and won the playoff game because Renato didn't play. Um, so
Right.
kind of his positions have been dropping, but this season he's pulled it back up, finished first in a regular season as well. Everything very close together, of course. And yeah, um, he's been having some great performances so far, and Bastel as well for his debut season. Some standout performances for this final. Of course, the format has not changed. It is one person, one map per person of their choosing to like a certain criteria. You know, you can't just choose a map with 10 locations of your hometown. Uh, um,
Right.
but you know, I think I gave them as a criteria. It has to have like at least 1,000 locations in there, just so you can't like learn it by heart. Of course, if you practice enough, you might be able to get a repeat here or there, but that kind of just, you know, can happen with any map really. But you know, you kind of want to limit it a bit. And the choices of the players have been Intersection Guesser Arizona for Barry, which, you know, kind of understandable, I suppose. Maybe he's from Arizona, who knows? Maybe he just knows the state very well. And for Bastel, he's chosen the standard Geoguessr map of Andorra, which is an
Yeah.
interesting choice. I mean, you can become pretty good at Andorra. It's a fairly small country, so you'd presume that there might not be, um, you know, too much of a home advantage factor there that plays in, but more so that he's just played the country a lot. Maybe he's visited it a bunch of times. Who knows? Um, but it is a fairly risky pick still, I think, because yeah, as I said, it's not a very big country, so it's very practicable as well. And with that, I think he'd be pretty much relying on just outspeeding Barry essentially, which I guess you could also just, you know, see with Arizona, as that's also not really the most difficult map. Intersection guesser maps generally tend to kind of gravitate towards population centers in relatively sparsely populated areas. Like Arizona doesn't really have the highest density of population. So
Mhm.
a lot of locations probably near the city centers, which again could just lead to like a speed run and who can get a 25k faster. But that could lead to some pretty interesting games, and we'll see about that. And of course, the AI generated world, as always, to decide that matchup. What do you think about this matchup in particular? I guess you can start with the maps.
Yeah, so Barry choosing Arizona as his map, definitely an interesting choice. I mean, obviously makes sense to choose the US map as an American. I feel like Arizona, I mean, I haven't played like an Arizona map specifically, but just what I know about the state, um, I think it can be a challenging state to play. I think there are a lot of like sort of those longer roads through deserts and, you know, some mountains in the north as well. But yeah, it is intersection guesser though, so at least you won't be placed on like a long straight road with like no clues on either side. But as I kind of suggested, there are deserts, there are mountains, there's a fairly diverse range of landscapes, and I think that is relatively learnable. There are a few distinct landscapes you could kind of pick out. But with intersection guessers specifically, I think urban Arizona could make for some interesting rounds as well, because you do have like the Phoenix sort of area where it's like Phoenix, Tempe, Scottsdale, that sort of whole population center where it's just nothing but one absolutely massive grid of just so many
Mm,
just so many roads and so many things to find. So maybe somehow pinpointing could be a little bit more difficult there, although there probably wouldn't be a shortage of clues, of course. So yeah, we'll see what happens on that map. For let's see, Bastel choosing the normal like GeoGuessr Andorra map is really interesting for sure. I don't think I've ever really seen that happen. I haven't really played that map a lot either, besides like I guess for explorer mode. But yeah, um, obviously super mountainous country. There's probably some more like remote areas where clues are hard to find, but I would imagine the more urban areas would be more straightforward. Um,
mm,
it could be a match of like outspeeding the other person, seeing who gets a 25K the fastest, but also like pinpointing obviously is going to be paramount here in such a small country, especially with all like the winding roads and whatnot. The difference between a win and a loss could just be like finding the right bend in some road. So it's
yeah.
definitely a good map if you want to test your like pinpointing skills, and obviously both of them are capable of playing at a high level, so that map should test them out a little bit if the seed allows them to.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely some very interesting seeds. A little bit of a change, finally, from seeing Polish subdivisions and Germany all the
Right.
time over the course of the last 3 seasons. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they play out. I mean, there's definitely a couple of different strategies you can always take with choosing those maps. You can, go for something that you know very well. You can go for something that perhaps might be on the more difficult side where, because the thing is, if you choose like an easy map, of course, if you know it very well, you can probably speedrun it faster. But the risk you run with that, if there's just one round that you might make a mistake pinpointing on and your opponent 5Ks it as well and then just gets a 25K, you're probably just going to lose if the map is too easy. Whereas with a really difficult map, I mean, obviously it relies on you yourself being good at it. But, you're kind of Indonesia, Russia, whatever. You kind of leave yourself a lot more room for error, which I think, especially in like such a high pressure game like a Reddit League final, might be something that you may want to have, where it's not just, okay, I was 30 meters off, I dropped points, it's just over now. With some more difficult maps, you might not have that problem. Um, but yeah, so far I think everyone has always kind of chosen the maps they're comfortable on, and maybe closer to their home countries. Looking forward to the day we
Mhm.
see something different, but not so far. And yeah, it'll definitely be an interesting game. We should be able to get the perspectives, of course, of both players. Both of them did record the semifinals, so we'll see all of those as well covered. And yeah, hopefully be a close and exciting final.
For
And
sure.
yeah, that will do it for this week. Again, thanks everyone for watching. I hope you look forward to all of the match casts, and we'll be back one more time next week with the final show of the season. And yeah, until then, bye.
Bye.